The governor did send along a proclamation that we will leave with the Humphrey family, and I'm not going to read the whole thing in the interest of time, but I'll pick up a couple of the lines. Whereas May 27th is the 100th anniversary of the birth of Vice President Hubert H. Humphrey, and whereas, as Senator and as Vice President, Humphrey was one of the most influential public servants of the last century. Nicknamed the Happy Warrior by his colleagues in the Senate, he found great joy in public service and was a tenacious yet cheerful legislator who consistently worked across party lines. And whereas Vice President Humphrey spoke often and forcefully in support of issues, and Americans continue to be inspired by his words, such as these from a civil rights speech at the 1948 Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, and most of you could probably say these with me. The time has arrived in America for the Democratic Party to get out of the shadow of states' rights, walk forthrightly into the bright sunshine of human rights. And it was once said that the moral test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, those who are in the shadow of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped. Now, therefore, I, Mark Dayton, Governor of Minnesota, do hereby proclaim May 27th, 2011, as Hubert H. Humphrey Day in the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Governor Dayton. Now, please welcome Dr. John Najarian, a renowned transplant surgeon, one of Vice President Humphrey's doctors in the later phases of his life. Vice President Humphrey, come on up, respected Dr. Najarian greatly for his pioneering work in heart surgery and, of course, for the quality of his extraordinary care. Dr. Najarian.
Thank you very much. It was my honor to take care of Senator Humphrey at the time, the last 6 months of his life. And I would just like to read one short comment from Humphrey. The House tribute, surrounded by an official visits with the President, the Senate, and the House were finished. But the best was yet to come. A dinner at the White House where Frank Sinatra sang one of Humphrey's favorite, "The Lady is a Tramp." Elizabeth Taylor, in the new jewel of Washington glitter, kissed him on each of his sunken cheeks. The treasurer of the United States, a black woman named A.Z. Taylor Morton, stood up and said, "Were it not for Hubert Humphrey, I might not be here tonight without an apron on." What a wonderful tribute to this most extraordinary man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Najarian. Our next speaker is Minneapolis Mayor R.T. Rybak, who really doesn't need an introduction from me. I will simply say, in the spirit of Hubert H. Humphrey, this Minneapolis mayor brings limitless energy from across a range of initiatives, all aimed at making Minneapolis a globally world-class city. Mayor Rybak.
It's very dangerous to stand up in front of a large group of people and admit that you have a fantasy, but I'm going to do that. When I got elected mayor, I had this wonderful fantasy. I thought that somewhere in this incredible building with all this history, somewhere there was this attic filled with dust where I'd go and I'd find all this wonderful Hubert Humphrey memorabilia. I was so excited. I'd been elected mayor of Minneapolis. I was going to actually have the same job as Hubert Humphrey, and I thought, how cool. Maybe I can find Hubert Humphrey's desk. Maybe I can find his chair or something else. So I got the crew who works here to come with me way up there in what I perceive to be the attic. And I walked through there, and it's true, there is some dust up there. There certainly was before we cleaned the whole atrium. But Mayor, as you know, I looked everywhere in this whole building, and I could find almost nothing left by Hubert Humphrey. I did find a little credenza. We have that in the conference room next to the mayor's office, and we now call that the Humphrey room, but that's it. And I was pretty sad about that because, you know, so many people talk about the incredible legacy that he had as a senator and a vice president, all of which is unbelievably true. But it's really clear to me that his time as mayor was a remarkable period that I think moved the city further than any mayor who's ever been here. It was a short period of time, but it was an incredibly pivotal period of time. It was a period of time in which he came into the most anti-Semitic city in the country, one of the most racially segregated cities in the country, a place where there were enormous issues with housing, deep, deep issues with corruption. And what he did was come in and really do what you would expect someone like Hubert Humphrey to do, which is he kicked butt. Hubert Humphrey walked in here and did some incredible, remarkable things. He changed the fair housing laws. He created a human rights department that became the civil rights division of the city. He moved forward on multiple actions. He brought in a new reform-minded police chief, and he did all sorts of other reforms. But more than anything else, when you really look at the job Hubert Humphrey did as mayor, is he looked people in the eye and he said, "We are not going to treat you all equally." Now that sounds a little strange. We're not going to treat you equally. But when you look at his work as mayor and the through line in his entire career, he said government was here to treat everyone fairly, but not equally. That government's role was really to disproportionately invest where there was disproportionate need, to make sure that what you did was to say that at a period of time in which people were in need, you couldn't treat them the same as those who had plenty. I think right around the corner you see one of his pamphlets that says something to the effect, "It's about time to tax the rich," which is kind of an interesting philosophy. But if you look around the corner, you'll see that that's not a new thought in the city of Minneapolis or in the state of Minnesota. And so as sad as it is to me that there's not physically a piece of Hubert Humphrey here in this city, I believe there is. And when you really study the history of Minneapolis, there was a seismic shift in the value system of this city after Humphrey left, that he really turned the tide in this city. And so we had great leaders who came after him. Mayor Fraser, whose entire career was based on that. Mayor Sales Belton, whose entire career was that. Senators and legislators and anybody who came out of this city was really about that idea that we have to pay more attention to those with more need. And that, to me, is a legacy of Hubert Humphrey. There is no attic here. There's each of our hearts and each of our political value systems that are so much about what this incredible man left us here in the city of Minneapolis. As I mentioned yesterday, it is ironic and somewhat sad that we're celebrating this at a period of time when we are having one of the largest human tragedies that we have ever had in the city of Minneapolis. God willing, it won't be known as the largest, but boy, it's going to be close. The human needs that we see in North Minneapolis go on and on. Every day we learn deeper challenges that we have. We're doing really good work, friends, but we also have huge needs. So here a tornado hits the part of town with the greatest needs. And how sad that it would happen on the 100th birthday of Hubert Humphrey. How appropriate that the response of this community has been that all hands are on deck. And next Saturday, when we have the great North Minneapolis rebuild, where we're asking everybody to come and be part of rebuilding, that's what this is about. So in the name of Humphrey, I think we have to double down on the value system that he left us, that in times of great need, with people in great need, we need to spend more time with those in need. And that, to me, when I come down these stairs or go up them and I feel them just a little bit bent where the marble would be, or a little bit worn down a little bit, and I dream about the fact that a long time ago, there was a great man who walked up and down that. I think the beauty is we know that he still walks with us. So for the whole Humphrey family, thank you for the gift of Hubert, but thank you for the gifts you continue to give to all of us. Thank you, Humphreys, and we so appreciate everything we've gotten for you. Thank you. One of the other gifts the Happy Warrior gave us is that he recognized that it was time to really get out and be somebody who really celebrated life. And I think I'm about to introduce another Happy Warrior who's a humorous warrior, but a deeply intelligent and value-driven warrior for the city and the state of Minnesota. Al Franken keeps looking around wondering who I'm introducing. Our Senator Al Franken. So.
I think I have to explain to RT that people who do comedy for a living aren't necessarily really that happy. It's an honor to be here to celebrate Hubert Humphrey's 100th birthday and the reunion with so many great folks who had the privilege of knowing and working with him. Of course, I now hold Hubert Humphrey's seat in the United States Senate. Amy will tell you that she holds Hubert Humphrey's seat. That's because she does. You see, Humphrey himself held both seats. So both of us have the honor of holding Hubert Humphrey's seat, but I occupy the seat that Humphrey held from January 1949 through December of 1964, when he left to become vice president. While holding that seat, now my seat, Humphrey amassed an incredible legislative record on civil rights, workers' rights, arms control, including a nuclear test ban, food stamps, humanitarian, foreign aid, and the Peace Corps. So that is the real Humphrey seat. I like to think that Amy holds the Rod Graham seat. Now I'm happy. I also hold the Paul Wellstone seat. Paul used to love to tell this story about when early on in his career in the Senate, Fritz Hollings of South Carolina came up to him after Paul had made one of his speeches on the floor, and Hollings said, "Son, you remind me of Hubert Humphrey." And of course, Paul's chest swelled, and Fritz said, "You talk too much." Well, I certainly don't want to talk too much this evening, but there are a few things I simply must say. Hubert Humphrey was my hero. He stood for, he acted on, and he embodied every political principle that I cherish. The first issue that really got me animated about public affairs was civil rights. When I was about 12 or 13 years old, I remember very distinctly watching the news in our TV room with these tray tables that we ate dinner on. And my parents made us, me and my brother, watch the news. It didn't make us, we watched the news every night. Now, my mom was a Democrat, but my dad was a Republican. But you know, the kind of Republicans that don't seem to exist anymore. And I remember so clearly watching the news, on the news, those images of Southern sheriffs beating demonstrators and sicking dogs, police dogs on them, and putting fire hoses on them. And I remember my dad would say, "That is wrong. No Jew can be for that. No Jew can be for that." And when I was 13, Hubert Humphrey led the fight for the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and Barry Goldwater voted against it, and that year my dad became a Democrat. Now we know the story of Lyndon Johnson signing the Civil Rights Bill and turning to an aide and saying, "Well, I guess we've just lost the South for a generation." I think we lost it for more than a generation. But we did pick up one 56-year-old Jew from St. Louis Park. My dad voted for Johnson and Humphrey in '64. He campaigned for Humphrey in '68 and voted for him, obviously. He campaigned for McGovern in '72, for Carter and Mondale in '76 and '80, and for Mondale in '84. I know Dad voted for Dukakis in '88, but I honestly can't remember whether he worked for him. He was 80 and slowing down a bit. But in 1990, I got this call from Mom and Dad saying they love this professor from Carleton. And Dad was a member of the Senior Citizens Players for Wellstone, doing pro-Wellstone sketches in nursing homes. So all those years as a DFL activist emanated from my dad's passion for human rights, the issue that Hubert Humphrey championed all his life and brought him to national prominence with that speech that was quoted in the proclamation. The time has arrived for the Democratic Party to get out of the shadow of states' rights and walk forthrightly in the bright sunshine of human rights. Hubert Humphrey never got to be president. He came so close in 1968, and I think it's fair to say that our history would be very different and far better had he won. But I think you can draw a straight line from that speech in 1948 through the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act and the 68 Fair Housing Act, a straight line from those to the election in 2008 of our first black president. And while we have come so far, today as I toured the tornado wreckage on the north side, it was not hard to see how much harder we need to fight to continue Humphrey's legacy. The Twin Cities have the greatest disparity in unemployment of any major metropolitan area in the country. We have enormous disparities in educational outcomes and in health. Amy and Keith and I have big battles on our hands, and we are so fortunate to have as our model the happy warrior who taught us how to fight them. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Al. Thank you so much for that. As Kathy Tunheim mentioned, the governor, who did such a great job hosting the event last night, is ill tonight. So she said, would you stand in for the governor? And I thought, well, apparently this is as close as I'm ever going to get to the position. I may as well do it, right? So, but it's especially exciting to do that. To introduce our next speaker. This is actually the second time I've introduced both of our senators today because they've both been here to fully participate in our event on youth violence prevention, and we really appreciate that so much. Senator Klobuchar, I believe, carries on the values of Senator Humphrey when she took the lessons she learned here in the city and on the streets of Minneapolis and brought them to Washington. Her work on youth violence prevention, her work on so many other issues, proves that she's someone who understands what it's like to be effective at a national scale, but also be grounded in the values here at home. So please welcome our wonderful other state senator who holds, I'm not going to get in that argument which seat she holds, but she's a phenomenal senator, Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, Al. Okay, so yes, it's true we both hold Humphrey's seat, but I also hold Eugene McCarthy's seat. There you go. And Walter Mondale's is, which one? Which seat is Walter Mondale's?
You know, he was appointed.
But in any case, okay, I did want to, though, the one thing I've got on Al is that, and I mentioned this story today at lunch, is that when I got to the Senate, I actually, like Al, have seen Humphrey as such a role model, and I wanted his desk. You know, you get these desks and people carve their names in, and so I asked for Hubert Humphrey's desk, and about a month later, everyone got their desks, and I opened up my desk, and it was a Humphrey desk, but it was Gordon Humphrey. They'd made a mistake. It was Gordon Humphrey, who was a sort of little-known senator from New Hampshire. So for 2 years, I had that desk, and one night when we were voting on health care late into the night, I sit next to Jean Shaheen, the senator from New Hampshire, and I said, you know, I told her this hilarious story. I go, well, you should have this desk. I got this New Hampshire Senator, Gordon Humphrey. She said, well, how do you know it's his desk? I said, they carved their names in. I opened it up to show her, and what I didn't know is the new Congress had come in, they replaced the desk, and I had Hubert Humphrey Humphrey's desk, and it said Humphrey. So that's pretty cool. So there you go, Al. I wanted to thank the mayor for the wonderful introduction. As I was listening to him, I was thinking about this Monday when we were all out in North Minneapolis. I see Council President Johnson out there with Don Samuels and others, and we were there, and RT has this amazing capacity to think big, just as Humphrey did. And we're sitting there, and people are crying, you've got these houses down, you're thinking immediately get the trees out of the way, and RT whispers to me, now's not the time to think of it, but I think we could do something really great with this street. And he thinks ahead, even in the midst of rubble, even in the midst of disaster, something that our good friend Don Fraser always did as well. So I want to thank both of them for their great mayors. When I think first of Hubert Humphrey in my own life, I think I met him once with my dad, and there's a great picture. Somehow he got my dad to do the first Minneapolis St. Patrick's Day parade. My dad is like Slovenian, right? So the two of them are on the back of a convertible together. But then the next thing I think about is his funeral, because I was a senior in high school, and I remember standing out there with my dad outside of the Capitol in this long line, below zero weather. All the Minnesotans in their puffy jackets and snowmobile suits, I think it was something like 40,000 people, stood out in the dead cold of a Minnesota winter. And I don't think that they would do that for many other people, but they loved that man, and they loved him enough to stand out there for hours in the cold. In the Senate, he is still a legend, because of course there are senators that served with Hubert Humphrey, like Senator Leahy and others, that remember him very fondly. And I showed the documentary that just came out this past year to our staff one Friday afternoon. We had popcorn and everything, and it was really a good thing for them to see. But what I hadn't known was at the end, they rolled through all the legislation that he had authored, right? You know, fingerprints on everything, civil rights, Medicare, nuclear arms control, Peace Corps. And the lights came on, and I see all our young staff, 23 years old, after seeing this roll of about 25 pieces of legislation, like that. It was somewhat intimidating, I think, for young staff members to see that. But I think that that the impact of that legislation lives on and on and on. The other thing that I've always heard about Hubert Humphrey from my colleagues in the Senate is how much, as Al mentioned, he loved to talk, but he also loved people, and he loved campaigning, and he loved getting out there. And there is a story, and I think it's in Al Isley's book, Almost to the Presidency, but it's about when he was out there, I think in northern Minnesota, and there was a bus stopped on the road, and they were out campaigning with Miles Lord. And Miles Lord said, let me get on the bus first and kind of check it out for you before you get on the bus and greet everyone. So Miles Lord gets on the bus, and then he goes, okay, yeah, you should get on the bus. And Humphrey gets on the bus, and he's just waiting for that love and everyone to shake his hand, and everyone's like this. Not shaking his hand. He gets out the bus. He said, what's wrong? Like, what's happened? What, are they mad at me? What's happened? Miles Lord had gotten on the bus and said, okay, there's a guy getting on the bus. He kind of looks like Hubert Humphrey. He's a little off. He's going to say he's Hubert Humphrey. He's not really Hubert Humphrey. True story. And then the other thing that we all know that both the mayor and Senator Franken mentioned is that he just never backed down. He never backed down from a fight worth fighting. We watched today at lunch the videos of that 1948 speech at the National Democratic Convention. And you think about that time. Here's a 37-year-old mayor from Minneapolis, his political career just getting off the ground. He has a lot to lose. But he was convinced that segregation and the Jim Crow laws were hurting our country, and he was determined to challenge the status quo. I think you know what happened. 35 Dixiecrat delegates stood up and walked out, but he was unfazed. He was not the kind of person to crouch down and cower in the face of a bully. He wouldn't fold to opposition or compromise his values, not ever. And I think that's what made people love him so very much. The other thing that the Vice President mentioned today that I have thought a lot about as we deal with the changing international world, and our office got inherited all the senators' pictures from Senator Durenberger, and we did all this research on the senators that we have up on our wall in our big conference room, and that's how I've learned about them. Like, our first senator, Senator Shields, I don't know if you know this, he challenged Abraham Lincoln to a duel. Luckily, it never occurred. And then we had Senator Johnson, who had such a heavy Swedish accent that they called him generally speaking Janssen in the Senate. But one of them who has like the wildest hair, and I always point him out to visiting Minnesotans, is Hendrik Shipstead. And I just would always make fun of his hair when they're in there. But I later found out when I was researching for my Eugene McCarthy lecture last summer that Hendrik Shipstead was one of only 2 senators who voted against the UN Charter, and the other was from North Dakota. We also had Harold Knudsen, the congressman who bitterly opposed the Marshall Plan after World War II, and instead suggested we give Europe a paddle and tell them, go paddle your own canoe. So we had this isolationist history in our state, and it was Humphrey and Walter Mondale that came in, Minnesota's greatest generation in politics, who believed in things like global engagement and international trade and arms control and the UN. And you trace that time in our history, the opening up of the St. Lawrence Seaway, with also a great expansion of our business community and a reach out, and companies like 3M and General Mills, and how they were able to also build into worldwide presences. At the same time, we had a political team that was doing the same thing. And I think that's something you don't always think of with Humphrey. Last thing I'd mention, just from my perspective, is that one of the things I love is that we've now produced not 1 but 2 vice presidents out of the state of Minnesota. And I always tell people in Washington, ours is the only state where young mothers bounce their babies on their knees and say, one day you can grow up to be vice president. The last thing that I would just end with was that from my own personal experience campaigning, and it was just that time when I was campaigning for Senate, and it's so tough, you have to raise all this money, and somehow it's New Year's Eve, and I told the staff we had to get some money from some guy at a liquor store. It was legal. And I told the staff, you didn't have to go get this is like a year and a half ago. I'll go do it. You guys go home. It's New Year's Eve. I'll go to the liquor store. And so I went there, and for some reason I had my daughter with me in this snowsuit. And I'm standing in one of Minneapolis's liquor stores with my daughter in a snowsuit, and the liquor store owner gives me cash, and he gives me this $100. I go, well, no, I've got to write down your name. I have to know who it's from. And he goes, okay, this is from my brother. And I'm standing in the liquor store writing down everyone's names, how much they gave, with this kid, and this guy who is a supporter walks in, who's a big Republican, sees me with this money and this kid. He goes, oh my God, this is how I always thought Democrats raised money. And so I was like it was really one of the lower points of my time running for office, and it was this liquor store was somewhat near Lakewood Cemetery. This is a true story. So I said to Abigail, it's snowing. And I said, you know what, let's go over, because I've actually never looked at Hubert Humphrey's grave, and I think it's going to be inspirational for us. It's New Year's Eve, and we need something more positive than this moment in the liquor store. So we went over there, and the gravestone was actually covered with snow. You couldn't read it all. It was like out of a movie. So she goes there with her mitten, and she takes all the snow off. And I saw today that many of you had that quote on some of your the programs, but I'm just going to read it one last time, because it was a low moment for me in the campaign, and it bucked me up, because on his tombstone it reads, I have enjoyed my life, its disappointments outweighed by its pleasures. I have loved my country in a way that some people consider sentimental and out of style. I still do, and I remain an optimist with joy, without apology, about this country and about the American experiment in democracy. And I think that's a little optimism that we need right now in the United States Capitol as we confront one of the most challenging times we've ever had. And history is going to look back and decide if we're right or wrong, timid or courageous. And I know what Hubert Humphrey would have gone with: courage. So that's it. Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce someone who has been my mentor in politics forever, Vice President Mondale. I actually, my first job in politics was working for him as an intern. My first assignment, which I've related to, I think now 15 graduation groups, to tell them they need to take their first jobs very seriously because they never know where it will take them. My first job was as an intern for him, first job in Washington, and my first assignment for an entire 3 weeks was to do the furniture inventory of every piece of furniture in the Vice President's office, chairs, desks, tables. I was crawling under, writing down the serial numbers, and I learned 2 lessons from that experience. Number 1, the Vice President was very honest, nothing was missing. Number 2, you always take those jobs seriously, because that was my first job in Washington, and this was my second one. And the one thing that I have learned all those years, I worked with Walter Mondale at Dorsey and Whitney, and then I went to the Senate and heard more and more about everything that he'd done. A courageous leader on civil rights. As a young senator, he led the floor fight for landmark open housing amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1968. He was a pioneer thinker on family policy, child development, holding hearings unheard of in the 1970s on disadvantaged children, wrote child development legislation that is now 30 years ahead of its time, advocate and still is for oversight and accountability for our country's intelligence agencies. He served on the Church Committee that investigated intelligence abuses. And for me personally, when we went back after Geraldine Ferraro died this year, and thinking about that moment, that's the moment I'll never forget in politics. When he stood there in Minnesota and announced that he had picked Geraldine Ferraro as his running mate, it made it seem for a girl who was a college sophomore that anything and everything was possible. So for that, Vice President Mondale, for your decency, for your belief in opportunity and progress, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Amy, for those kind words. I feel very lucky to be able to watch Amy Klobuchar grow and increase in influence and stature in the United States Senate. She's been a tremendous success. I know she's going to be, we can't take this for granted, of course, in a democracy, but I think she's going to win big in the next election, and that will also be a joy. When Hubert was running for the Senate and then the next election, we coined the motto that Minnesota deserves 2 strong United States senators. And in Amy Klobuchar and Al Franken, Minnesota again has 2 strong United States senators. And that's a big break. I was very fortunate to have a career that was close to Hubert Humphrey. I started out peddling literature for Humphrey for mayor because I heard him speak once at McAllister, and I got hooked, it turns out, for a lifetime. And then I ran Hubert's campaign in southern Minnesota in 1948 for the Senate. Now there were no Democrats down there. And we had to carry it for Hubert, and we did. And I remember the joy of seeing him elected. And then the time came where I could join Hubert in national politics. And those years that went so fast are still precious to me. And I'm so glad we're using this occasion to celebrate and to learn again about Hubert on his 100th birthday. We've gone over most of the ground, I think, today, and I'd like to just touch one point that amazed me, where I lived up close with Hubert, and I think should be remembered as a part of his legacy. You will recall that his last couple of years in the vice presidency were really tough, and that when he ran for president in '68, because of the war, his challenges were tremendous. But by the end of the campaign, the American people looked at him again, and they saw something that they hadn't seen for a while, and the crowd started growing, and the hecklers started applauding, and young people started seeing something new in Hubert, and before it was over, Humphrey came within far less than 1% of winning the presidency. If we'd had 2 more days, Hubert would have been president of the United States. But then he went home, and he was out of office for the first time in 25 years. Is it over? And he didn't know, I don't think, what he was going to do. Then McCarthy stepped down. Humphrey ran and won big, returned to the United States Senate, and he was full of joy because he remembered the Senate, and then he discovered it was different. Now he was a senior senator, but serving as a junior senator. He was a person of experience, but treated like he was brand new. He was given poor committees because he didn't have seniority. This former majority whip of the United States Senate was now sort of on the outside looking in. He could have just quit. He could have given up. Instead of that, for me, a new Hubert showed up. He got up off the floor, and within a few years, he was a national hero again. I saw him convert a small position into big things. He got weak positions, just as he did the weak mayorship of Minneapolis. They finally put him on the Foreign Relations Committee, but he was in a junior position. But within about 5 months, he was the strongest person on the committee. The State Department always wanted to talk to Hubert Humphrey. He got on a nothing committee, the Joint Economic Committee, and turned it into a powerhouse of economic thinking. And finally, the Senate that had looked the other way at Hubert Humphrey elected him the Deputy President Pro Tem of the Senate. He had arrived again as a leader. And even when he knew he was dying of cancer, and John Najarian, God bless you for what you did for him, that didn't stop him either. When he should have been in bed, he got up and went to the AFL-CIO and gave that great speech that Dave Rowe talked about. And then I was there when Humphrey came back to the Senate for the last time. And the whole Senate turned up. I remember seeing Barry Goldwater in tears running to hug Hubert. He went to the House and the same thing happened. Hubert was once asked if he would ever get out of the shadow of Johnson's unpopularity. He said never. But the Washington Post, just a few days before his death, reported on a poll of 1,000 Americans that had chosen Hubert the greatest senator in the past 75 years. My God, Humphrey said, Lyndon Johnson's going to be sore as hell about this. At the memorial service for Humphrey in the Capitol Rotunda, which itself was a remarkable event, with presidents and leaders gathered as they would say goodbye to a revered president, I ended my eulogy to Hubert with these words from Shakespeare. A good leg will fall, a straight back will stoop, a black beard will turn white, a fair face will wither, but a good heart is the sun and the moon, or rather the sun and not the moon, for it shines bright, never changes, but keeps its course truly. Here we are tonight, 100 years after his birth, and I believe as far as we're all concerned, Hubert's heart, like the sun, still shines bright, keeps its course truly, and has never changed. God bless you, Hubert.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We have a couple things left to do before it's time to just party, which is I know what some of you are looking forward to doing. But what we have yet to do is important too. First, I want to take just a moment to acknowledge and thank the person who had the vision for what needed to happen today. He kept saying, you know, we need an opportunity to come back together and remember how we get to be optimistic. This is how magic happens. This is how we find solutions to public problems. Bob Meek.
Yo, Bob.
I want to make sure everyone has a chance to see you, my friend. Some of us have been getting emails from Bob for a year and a half, making sure we all showed up tonight like we were supposed to, so God bless you, Bob.
Yeah, you'll stop now.
And one of the ideas that Bob had was that in addition to hearing from the people that we heard from today and having the opportunity for inspiration, we needed to acknowledge and say thank you to a number of people who have, in their own ways, brought extraordinary distinction in their public service to Minnesota. And the people who are going to help us do that are Hubert Humphrey III and Hubert Humphrey IV. Buck and Skip, come on up.
Go for it, Buck.
Well, we know it's late and you don't need a long Humphrey speech. So let me just say to our senators, Mr. Vice President, those words were beyond. It was spirit and heart. And it's good to know that it's not just in the past, but it's here today and in the future, and certainly in our leadership, both nationally and locally. Mr. Mayor, your magnificent city, the City Hall, has just been wonderful. And I think I have to say a special thing about Bob Meek too. You know, if there was anything that Dad was about, it was about a dream. He would have some kind of crazy idea, and the next thing you know, it would become reality. This man had a dream. I remember Bob Meek talking to me and saying, I think we got to do something about your father's 100th birthday. This was 2 years ago. And I'm thinking, oh, what are we going to do now? Today is a dream come true. And it's a dream not just for today, but it lays a foundation for the future. Thank you, Bob Meek. Now, I don't want to say anything. You want to say anything?
One Humphrey's enough.
One Humphrey's enough. We're going to get right on to this. We have some very special awards to give. Again, and they are there. The Humphrey Leadership Awards to be presented to individuals in recognition of a lifetime of leadership and dedication to serving others. And so first, I want to give one to Mr. Mick Coet. I don't know if any of you have not seen that wonderful film, but you've got to see it if you haven't. It captures the essence of my father and your grandfather. Mick, where are you? Here he comes. What a wonderful man, great director, wonderful film.
Mick.
Absolutely magnificent. Mr. Al Isley. I am informed as Al comes forward that Buck will be reading The Hill. It's kind of an inside joke. Al has served so well our nation, and I want to thank you in the spirit of Dad. Orville and Jane Freeman, and this is to be accepted by Michael. Michael, who is serving so well as our county attorney, advocate, defender. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to your mother. Now, you know that as Mike leaves, Jane celebrated her 90th birthday. And I got to tell you, she was trying to straighten me out still. Mr. Elmer and Tom Kelm. And I think they are not here. Yes.
Little Kelm.
Come right on up. Elmer, thank you. Thank you so much.
She is doing incredible work in the governor's office. Thank you.
Yes. I had to look Mr. Tom Kelm in the eye pretty directly several times, and I know who the boss was, and it wasn't me. Norm Sherman, come right on up here. You have done such an outstanding job today, and what a marvelous life, and thank you for all of your help and your service. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, we have two very strong leaders, Arvon and the Honorable Don Fraser. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Representative, Mrs. Mayor. We have had a wonderful opportunity to also hear from one of our former governors today, the Honorable Governor Arnie Carlson. Arnie, I know you're here.
Get up here, Arnie.
I warned Arnie as he comes up, I warned Arnie if he keeps talking the way he's talking, someone's going to want him to run again. That's okay. We get it. Very special, and Kathy, I think we need to move forward on some of the other things here, but this is so special. Thank you for your help. Do we?
Yeah, a couple more.
Are there a couple more?
Oh,
No,
Okay.
we're all set. As usual, we're all set. I merely say this, Kathy has helped put this together in a way that only Kathy Tunheim could do, and I want to personally thank her for that. And we do have one more, and that's Mr. Eric Nathanson. Eric, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Of course. There's a gentleman who's been here all day, who was part of the first roundtable that we had here, who gave an unbelievably impassioned conversation and storytelling about our dad, and that is Mr. Tom Tipton. And Tom, I want to thank you. You brought forth truly the spirit of Hubert Humphrey. Now, Tom told the story that Dad didn't know that he was a singer for, several years, and then he never quite knew. But we all know this man has a voice that captures the spirit of our country, our nation, and certainly of Hubert Humphrey. And we thank you. I'm going to have you do it.
I'd like to simply reflect with the help of Tim Ansett from Living Word Christian Center. I'd like to reflect on that moment in St. Paul on that cold day, 30 below zero, by the way. as you were walking up the steps with your mother, Muriel, Bruce Thomason was walking with her. You walked behind, and Bucky was 8 years old. It was a cold day, and as she walked up the steps and I was on the side singing this song, she kind of did like that, reflective of the humility of the Humphrey family, nationwide and worldwide. So in tribute to Muriel, it's important that we all stand and listen, if you may, to this song that set the tone for that great hero in heaven named Hubert Humphrey. May we all stand, just listen. I have two short songs to sing, but this is reflective of that day. It was an incredible cold day. Robert Schuller was there, and Walter did your thing in a beautiful, serious, warm manner. And it touched the souls and hearts of many, many millions of people worldwide. And it touched the hearts of people, Afro-Americans, who had not been touched because the nation's capital was segregated. And I don't mind sharing that because it's so true. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage well. The graves of grass are stored. He has loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with the glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free. Our God is marching. Everybody, go. Everybody said, Hubert, he know that. It's true. Now I want to hear a little louder. Sing this for the Humphrey, everybody. Hallelujah. Everybody sing. One more strong time, and we all sing. Lord, hallelujah, his marching on. Give God a hand clap in here. And as we close out this incredible week of joy, of the happy warrior, of the Humphrey family, their pain, their suffering, their joy, their happiness, beyond politics, And the people who surrounded him, all in this room and others not here, established a legacy that can never be touched, because he was loved, because he cared, and because he gave. And even as John grew close to death, he was still the happy warrior. He touched people on his deathbed. You said it, others have said it today. We can never forget that. So I sing in closing this song, a song that he loved, a song that is about grace. And if I wanted to sort of identify Hubert, I would say he was grace that was so amazing. Listen carefully and in your own quiet way reflect on this man. Amazing grace, how sweet, sweet the sound, oh, that saved a wretch like me. And I once was lost, but now I'm found. See, I was blind, no, but now Jesus, I see. 'Twas grace that taught heart to fear, and it was grace my fears, yes, relieved. Bob, how precious, precious did that grace appear. The hour I first believed. Listen as I close. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know less days to sing God's praise than when we've first begun. We've no less days to sing God's praises, than when we first begun. Let your heart say amen. God bless you.